First, I'd like to welcome all of you for tuning in and joining us for the Framing the Future monthly webinar series on the third Thursday of each month. This month's program is unique and very special to the Maryland Forestry Foundation. I want to welcome you on behalf of the foundation. My name is Gary Allen, the president of the foundation, and one of our most outstanding programs is the Mel Fellowship Program. It's been in existence since 2017 with special support from the Department of Natural Resources and the state of Maryland. It provides support for students in higher education to pursue degrees in natural resources careers and urban and community forestry. We've been extremely privileged to have a number of very outstanding participants in the program. And today we're very pleased to have 3 of the current fellows with us. Having said that, let me remind you, the program is being recorded. It will be available at a later date on YouTube. And for those of you who are tuning into this and interested in applying for this program, applications will be available on the Maryland Forestry Foundation website starting in the coming week. So please tune in. The application period runs from the middle of May through the middle of July, when the decision will be made in the latter part of July. So please look at the application if you're interested in the experiences being shared here today. As your host, it's my privilege to also turn to our moderator, who is the first Mel Fellow dating back to 2017. It's my privilege to introduce Megan Carr. Megan, take it away.
All right, thanks, Gary. Yeah, so a brief note on our topic today. So we are, of course, hearing about the experiences of 3 of our 4 current Mel Fellows. The Mel Fellowship is near and dear to my heart, since that was a really wonderful way for me to get engaged in the forestry community in Maryland. And so very excited to see how that program has expanded to support more students, more early career professionals looking to get more involved in the field. A brief note for our audience today: if you have questions for our panelists, please be sure to enter those in the Q&A chat, and we will make sure that we have time to address those questions at the end of our session today. But without further ado, we'll get started and hear from our fellows. First up, we have Yazan Hassan, who is a student at the University of Maryland College Park, where he is pursuing degrees in environmental science and technology, as well as geospatial data science. An experienced photographer and filmmaker, Yazan has had several exhibitions between North America and Europe. Yazan is passionate about fostering genuine connections between people and the land through digital storytelling. So, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So as Megan introduced, I am one of the fellows, and I think the overarching goal of this fellowship is to help students matriculate into their degree and help them achieve the already existing academic goals that they had, while also introducing them to forestry and helping them engage with the industry on a state level. So I guess I'll speak a little bit about all the wonderful opportunities that I've had that the Mel Fellowship has enhanced. I can't emphasize enough how helpful the fellowship has been in achieving all my goals this year. Whether it was through the very generous stipend that has made a lot of aspects of student life much easier, or through the guidance and wisdom of having access to very experienced industry folks like Mr. Allen, like other folks that we've been introduced to. And we also have the opportunity to go and visit a conference. So back in, I think it was November, I got the chance to go to Seattle for the first time ever and see attend the Urban Partners in Community Forestry Conference. And I had a wonderful time, and I actually got the chance to meet the previous year's fellow, Sarah Ponte, where she was presenting. And it was amazing, especially for me in Maryland. I think we are students who have recently come out of a pandemic. It's still very much refreshing to go and travel and meet with people, professionals from all over the country, and get to network with them and learn more about some of the fascinating things that they're presenting. So that's the specialness of that is not lost on me. So one aspect of my background that might be a little bit different from a traditional STEM student is I'm also a photographer and filmmaker. And I've actually used those tools to enhance my experience with forestry. So I've done a few projects, one of which I can share real quick. If I can open up my, share my screen. So this past December, I had my first exhibition in Washington, D.C. at Tribute Gallery, where I was highlighting old growth olive trees and their ecological significance in Palestine. And so I got to give an interview, I got to show folks some of my photography, and it was an extremely validating experience because, you know, research is important, abstracts and papers are important, but I think that storytelling and science communication is a very underrated tool for engaging communities and encouraging science education and encouraging forestry and so on and so forth. So that was something that I was very proud of, that I wouldn't have been able to accomplish as easily if it wasn't for the fellowship. Something else that I got to do that was pretty cool is I did a screening of a film that I had produced. I'll show some photos. So I think 2 years prior, I created a film and a photo essay about saltwater intrusion on the Eastern Shore and how that impacts farmers and communities on the Eastern Shore. So this is these are some photos that I took that are on my website. But I also created a film that I'm happy to share if anyone wants to. And I had multiple screenings of this film, and I received really great reception. And I'm happy because I got to shine a light on an issue that I think most people on the other side of the bridge are very ignorant to. Me being a native of Annapolis, I had only ever known the Eastern Shore as somewhere I would pass by on the way to the beaches. But when I learned that, you know, there was massive changes taking place in the landscape and that communities were being abandoned and that whole swaths of land were being converted into marshes, it shocked me. And seeing the abandon and seeing the very rapid and dramatic changes in the land, it inspired me and it made me want to tell a story. So I got the chance to do a screening of that film very recently here on campus at a research symposium. And again, I think it's refreshing. I think it's refreshing when people get a chance to sit down, put on some headphones and hear voices from on the ground, as opposed to, you know, viewing a poster, which is still a wonderful way to present information too. One other thing I got to accomplish this semester, which I'm very excited to share, is I got to study abroad in Iceland, which I also wrote a blog post about on the Maryland Forestry Foundation website. So I'll share some photos here. This is me and my cohort. Funny enough, so this program, it was an engineering program. But I was the only non-engineering student in the whole cohort. So we went to so the purpose of the program was to learn more about renewable energy. However, I took pride in my ability to bring a more environmental perspective to a lot of our lessons. You know, while they were talking about volumetric flow rates and kilowatt hours, I was talking about soil science and why is Iceland devoid of forests and how has that impacted soil degradation and so on and so forth. Iceland is a very unique case when it comes to forestry in that Iceland used to be vastly forested like much of Europe was before settlements, but now trees are a rare sight. And I posted in the Forestry Foundation website on a walking tour of Reykjavik, the capital city. The tour guide stopped at a very random and ordinary looking tree, and he actually told us that tree was the oldest tree in Iceland, and it must not have been more than 10 feet tall and maybe maybe 3 feet in diameter. So it was very shocking to me. And I learned that I learned and wrote about the history of the Icelandic Forest Service, which has been tasked with reforestation because there's been a lot of soil degradation that's been happening and impacting the air quality as a result of the widespread deforestation. So that was a wonderful experience. I did that this past spring. Yeah, if anyone wants to ask questions, by the way, I'm more than happy to answer. I think the last experience of this year that I will share is while also in addition to this fellowship, I was interning at the U.S. Forest Service, the federal branch. And so not many people know this, but the Federal Forest Service actually has an air quality program. And so the focus of my internship was on air quality. And so I had a lot of creative freedom and was basically told, design a study, design a project, and it needs to have something to do with forests and something to do with air quality. So I was really interested in seeing what the relationship was between air quality and urban tree canopy across Baltimore and DC. And so basically what I did is I set up 2 sites in Baltimore and 2 sites in DC. Within each city, there was a high tree canopy site and a low tree canopy site. And then I went out to each site 3 times for a total of 12 trials each to collect air quality data. And I did that through a device that was mounted on my car, and I had to drive around the neighborhoods and collect that data. And so I did a geospatial analysis of the data and a few statistical tests, and the results were actually very surprising. So it turns out that, at least in my case, neighborhoods with higher tree canopy values had worse air pollution. And when I say air pollution, that's PM 2.5 and CO2 that I measured. Excuse me for one moment, that's my cat. Thank you. And yeah, so there's a few reasons why we might have this discrepancy, because the literature suggests otherwise. The literature suggests that higher rates of tree canopy in cities does improve air quality. But I think my biggest takeaway from the study that I did is that air quality is very finicky and it's very difficult to study because there's so many confounding variables. For instance, I couldn't go out and collect data if it was raining or if the wind speed was too high. And there's factors like topography and elevation, proximity to water. All these things impact air quality, and for that reason, I think my data was very limited. I collected all this data across 1 month, and so of course that doesn't take into account the seasonal variation of the data. So this is something that I hope to continue to research more. I'll stop sharing my screen now. But yeah, that was my experience for the most part this year. In terms of the future, some of my career goals reflect on combining environmental science with diplomacy. And so one example of that is that climate change, I think, is also a matter of national security. And so it's important that countries are able to cooperate on environmental issues because the air doesn't segregate, it doesn't discriminate, right? Climate change is an inherently global issue. So for the past few years, I've been studying Turkish because I'm very interested about environmental issues, especially in the Middle East region. And I'm happy to say that this summer, as a US Department of State critical language scholar, I will be heading back to Turkey to participate in an intensive Turkish language course. There's a lot of things that I want to do in my career. It's hard to narrow down because I really enjoy having an interdisciplinary focus, but I would love to work in the Foreign Service, in environmental conservation and development, and that also involves forestry. So if I could act as a consultant to companies and governments in the Middle East using my language abilities, that would be a dream come true. But also back home here in Maryland, I would love to do more community engagement and outreach. Something that I've always really enjoyed in my career is whenever I've had the chance to do environmental education, and especially to youth. I have a passion for storytelling, and that's something I'd like to continue in my career. So if I could do any sort of outreach or engagement work on a state or federal level, whether that's creating educational materials or teaching in classrooms, that's something I'm very interested in. And finally, I guess how I'll get there is, so I'm doing 2 degrees, one in environmental science and tech and one in geospatial data science. I added my second major of data science this past fall because I wanted more technical skills and I felt that it would aid my research, and it has. But for that reason, I will be graduating next spring, when it was originally supposed to be this spring. Afterwards, I'd like to get a master's degree, also in environmental science. I think I'd like to stay at the University of Maryland for that. I'm researching our options right now, but those are my plans for the foreseeable future. And everyone who is in attendance is very welcome to contact me. I'd be happy to share my website and my email. And thank you so much.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you for that overview and peek into the future. Yeah, excited to see what you get up to next. We'll continue with our presentations. So next up, we will be hearing from Marilyn Yang. She is a senior undergraduate at the University of Maryland studying environmental science and policy. Post-graduation, she hopes to pursue a career in environmental justice with a focus on the intersection of public health disparities and the inequitable distribution of environmental benefits and hazards. With a strong passion for addressing environmental inequities, Marilyn is particularly eager to explore interdisciplinary fields related to public policy, environmental health, environmental law, and community engagement. So welcome, Marilyn.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Megan. Good afternoon, everyone. As Megan said, my name is Marilyn Yang, and I'm a senior environmental science and policy major at the University of Maryland and the second urban and community forestry fellow. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, so today I'm just really honored to share with you my experiences with the MEL Fellowship Program, as I feel very fortunate to have been selected for this prestigious fellowship, and I'm just very appreciative of the way that it's impacted my overall educational and professional development. So to begin, I'm going to share a little bit about one of our fellowship requirements, where we were asked to write a research report to help frame future policy work on specific topics. And Yasin and I collaborated and wrote these reports together. And through our research, I gained a better understanding of the nuanced problems facing the forestry industry today, particularly through the lens of the urban forestry sector, as well as the traditional forestry sector. And it really introduced me to the ways in which these sectors differ, as well as identify areas of commonality and to investigate potential opportunities for collaboration for policy moving forward. In addition, through the fellowship, we've had several opportunities to attend conferences, which have broadened my knowledge of various issues related to forestry, but also other pertinent environmental and social issues. For example, we attended the Forestry Day in Annapolis, and we were able to hear many different perspectives related to traditional forestry and the future of our state's policy initiatives. In addition, I attended the Taking Nature Black conference, which left me feeling really inspired and with a greater understanding of the systemic and historical barriers that have barred Black communities from engaging in environmental work, including forestry, as well as the perseverance and critical work that historically marginalized groups have done in building awareness of systemic issues such as environmental racism by bringing them to the forefront. And I share this experience because the takeaways from this conference really resonated with me, because I'm incredibly passionate about environmental justice. And at the University of Maryland, I also serve as the co-president of 17 for Peace and Justice, which is UMD's environmental justice student organization. And with my position, I was able to share this opportunity with our organization and encourage other students to attend with me. And in my eyes, I see this as an example of how I was able to extend the benefits I received from this fellowship experience to positively impact my peers' educational and professional development as well. And here are just some of the photos that I took from that conference. Overall, however, one of the greatest ways in which this fellowship has really accelerated my growth was through the financial support I received through the generous stipend, which really furthered my educational experience, particularly in helping to enable me to study abroad in Chile last semester. There I was able to greatly improve upon my Spanish language skills, which I see as critical to the work I want to pursue in the future, working directly with communities. But I was also able to study Chile's indigenous cultures, which have provided me an incredibly humbling and insightful perspective into the vibrant indigenous communities in Chile, which for generations they've experienced the forced dispossession of their land and subsequent history of legalized discrimination, which undoubtedly has fueled and impacted many of the prevalent social issues in the region today. And in particular, I learned about the role of the indigenous communities in shaping Chile's environmental movements, including efforts to combat environmentally extractive and destructive forestry projects throughout the country. And for that course, I actually wrote my final report on the growing body of research illustrating the effective outcomes of protecting and enhancing forest integrity through reestablishing land tenure rights to indigenous peoples, and how these methods not only help to promote human rights and address longstanding injustices, but they also are demonstrating to be more effective and less costly than other traditional conservation approaches, such as state-owned protected areas or the establishment of national parks. And now I just wanted to share some photos. So this is a photo of Parque Nacional La Campaña. This is like one of the places that we got to visit. And I actually chose Chile because it's very ecologically diverse. The entire country kind of spans all of South America. And so there are lots of different biomes. And as an environmental science and policy major, it was really interesting to me. And here's just like one of examples of one of the things I got to see while I was there. This park is one of the most unique and representative areas of the country's central zone. It's situated in the middle of the coastal mountain range, and it's really significant because it has some of the last remaining Chilean palm forests, a species which is in danger of extinction. And just to kind of show how big these trees are, I have a photo of me like hugging one of the palm trees. But actually Charles Darwin came here to study. And so it just shows like kind of ecologically diverse Chile is. And then here is from Torres del Paine, which is in Patagonia, which spans like the lower half of Chile and also Argentina. And I included these photos because during my trip to Patagonia, I learned a lot about the forest fires that affected the park in 2011 and 2005. And what really stuck with me was one story that I learned from some of the locals about a forest fire in 2011 that was caused by a tourist that came in there and burned their toilet paper, which led to, I think it was something like 17,000 acres were destroyed. And it was just a very like eye-opening experience and story to kind of see how tourists have come in and like shaped this land in, destructive ways, but at the same time are providing revenue that is helping to fund the park's existence. And so it's like a very interesting balance, and it was definitely interesting to see. And here's some more photos of my experience from the national park. Some photos of the forest and some of the flowers from the time that I went. I went during one of the best parts of the season where everything was blooming. And so I felt just very fortunate for that entire event. And so, yeah, overall, as I prepared for this webinar, I had the chance to really reflect on these last several months. And what I want to close with is that I just feel very grateful for the support that the Mel Urban Forestry Fellowship has provided me. It's helped me to become more well-rounded and informed student as I navigated my final year at the University of Maryland. And moving forward, I plan to incorporate the lessons and experiences I gained through this fellowship within my future plans as I pursue a career with a focus on environmental justice and engage in efforts to working to amplify and center the creation and implementation of environmental policies around communities disproportionately affected by the environmental degradation. Here are just some photos of what my experience was like studying at Andres Bello in Santiago, which is the capital of Chile. I learned a lot from the students there and my interactions with them. They have a very active, young population that cares deeply about environmental issues, and it's interconnected with the legacy of the indigenous communities and how the environment plays such a huge role. Here's like some photos of the protests that happened right outside of our schools. And like this flag is the Mapuche flag, which is one of the indigenous cultures in Chile. And moving forward, I have actually chose to extend my graduation to study abroad again next fall in Singapore. And Singapore is very different from Chile. And I kind of chose this place because of their geographic location. They've worked really hard in managing their natural resources. And because of that pressure, they've come up with a lot of really cool innovations and technology, which is very interesting to me. And I'm also going to be learning Mandarin, which will relate to other general work that I want to do in the future related to international environmental policy. So yeah, thank you so much for listening. And if you have any questions, I'll make sure to leave my email in the chat in case anyone wants to contact me.
Wonderful. Thank you, Marilyn. Let's see, I'm not sure if our chat will actually be visible to our audience. So maybe toward the end of this session, we might be able to put up a whiteboard for you and our other presenters to put their contact information. If any folks like prospective employers wish to follow up, things of that nature, or just have questions, want to continue the discussion. Speaking of continuing the discussion, we will hear from our third fellow up next. So Damani Eubanks is a PhD candidate at the University of Maryland. His research interests are focused on tree and forest ecology and finding ways to track and predict forest ecosystem responses to climate change and anthropogenic disturbances. He is also interested in bridging the gap between ecological research, forestry activities, and public policy decisions related to forest management. Damani believes that collaborative and interdisciplinary approaches are necessary to address the daunting environmental problems we currently face. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you for that introduction. As she was saying, my name is Damani Eubanks. I am a fifth year PhD student at the University of Maryland. And she gave a short rundown of my research, but I'll talk a little bit about my research and then how the Mel Fellowship and the Maryland Forestry Foundation has been supporting me through my research journey and my continuing career aspirations. So as she was saying, I study forest ecology at the University of Maryland and with specifics on forest health using a couple of different sets of data, publicly available data from the US Forest Service, along with climate and land use data to try and predict and track changes in forest ecosystem health as forests respond to climate change and to other anthropogenic disturbances. And really the goal for this research is to connect ecological research with on-the-ground management and conservation activities, and also connect with policy decisions and kind of attack the problem of deforestation.
Damani, real quick. I'm so sorry to interrupt, but your connection isn't terrific, so you're getting a little bit choppy. I don't know if you want to try to go to audio only for a moment, just to see if that helps.
You can try that. Is this a little bit better?
Your voice got a little bit distorted at the end, but let's try it.
Mhm. Okay, yeah. So sorry about that. Um, well, as I was saying, so the overall goal of my research and my research interest right now is to tie together and kind of a three-pronged approach at the environmental issues facing our society, combining research along policy and management outreach and all the different tools we have to really try and improve our environment. So with that, along with my research with the University of Maryland, I also work with the U.S. Forest Service in their Washington office, supporting the agency in coordinating national research efforts, especially with the recent large investments in conservation and research from the bipartisan infrastructure law and uh,
Damani, we're not able to hear you right now.
Did we lose him entirely?
yeah,
He's still connected.
sorry. Let me see if I can.
Does have a better audio?
Um, try saying one more thing.
So can you guys hear me now?
You're still a little bit choppy, but you had cut out entirely a moment ago. So I
Choppy.
just want to make sure folks get to
Okay.
hear from you.
Let me see if I might be able to call into this meeting using my phone. That might have the audio improve a little bit.
Okay, and right now you actually sound okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, well, so yeah, we'll keep going, and if I cut out, then I'll switch over to the phone. But kind of discussing my work with the Forest Service and kind of how that ties into my research. The Forest Service is really one of the leading agencies in the United States and really in the world in tying together research policy and on the ground management, which is why I was interested in working with the Forest Service. And so taking my work with the University of Maryland and with the Forest Service and turning to how the Maryland Forestry Foundation and the Mel Fellowship has been helping and supporting me through this time, through some of the events that I've been able to attend with through the Mel Fellowship. So the Maryland Forestry Board meeting in this last fall of 2020, I got to make some connections with all of the different county forestry boards in Maryland. And before this event, I had not even been aware that each county in Maryland had its own forestry board full of citizens and volunteers who were interested in issues around forest conservation. And so getting to be at that meeting and really see the engagement of all of these different groups from all over Maryland, all volunteers coming together to try and attack the different issues happening on a local scale as far as forestry and conservation, and getting to make some connections and really meet some people who are doing the kind of work that I'm interested in, and see that there's a lot of passion across the state of Maryland for forestry, and this kind of work was a very inspirational experience for me. And then also through the Maryland Forestry Foundation, I got to attend a film screening for a documentary titled Forest Her, focusing on women in conservation and in forestry work, and got to meet some of the director of the documentary and also some of the women who were featured in the documentary, and getting to hear their stories, what inspired them to become interested in conservation and interested in natural resources. was another really eye-opening experience for me, to be able to see, people from all walks of life, women of color who've been doing this work for decades, and be able to tell their stories was very inspirational, for me. And then also, the Forestry Foundation and the Mel Fellowship has supported a number of my kind of personal career endeavors. So I got to attend a number of conferences with the support of the Mel Fellowship. The first one being Taking Nature Black, which Marilyn mentioned, being a very, very interesting and great learning experience for me, to really kind of focus on issues that sometimes aren't always talked about in the conservation realm around socioeconomics and around race. And getting to hear different perspectives across social scientists, nonprofit organizers, and really kind of see that conservation and forestry is not just researchers, it's not just policymakers, but the citizens themselves and charities and other groups are really all tied together with us in this fight. And that was a really, really fun and great learning experience for me. And then I was also able to travel to the International Association of Landscape Ecology Conference in Riverside, California, with the help of the Mel Fellowship, to present some of my dissertation research, and also attend a number of really interesting talks and trainings at that conference, and able to make some good connections across the Forest Service and really meet with scientists from all over the world who are interested in similar research issues as me. And that was actually the first conference that I had gotten to present at. And without the help of the Mel Fellowship, I wouldn't have been able to get there. So that was really an eye-opening experience for me, getting to present in front of peers and get feedback on my research, the work that I'm doing, and see other research going on in the field focused on forest conservation and seeing how climate change and land use is affecting forests at different scales. And so I was able to take some really great things out of that experience and hopefully bring that back to some of the work that I'm doing in my PhD and also some of the work that I'm doing with the Forestry Foundation. And so some of the work that I've been doing as part of my fellowship has been promoting the National Resources Careers Camp, the Natural Resources Careers Camp coming up this summer in July. And so promoting that camp, which is focused on high school students who are interested in natural resources and natural resource careers. So using social media to promote the camp and to get enough students to fill the camp, which I believe we have done. So the camp will have full capacity of students all over the state of Maryland. And I'm really excited coming up to attend some of the days of the camp and really get to engage with the students. That is one of the things that I think is really important with conservation and in general is the outreach portion, getting new scientists, new blood that's interested in conservation and is passionate about it, because that's going to be, the next generation of scientists, the next generation of conservationists. And so I'm really looking forward to kind of finishing out that experience. So been promoting it, and now to actually go to the event and see, all of the really interesting programming that has been put together, different guest speakers and field trips and different activities that have been put together for the students. So that is kind of the big thing coming up as far as the work that I've been doing with the Mel Fellowship. And unfortunately, I don't have any slides, but I do have a few pictures just from my trip to Riverside, where I was able to present at the conference. I'll share my screen here. And yeah. So yeah, through everything that I've been able to experience with the support of the Mel Fellowship, I really feel like I have had a number of very good career experiences. And for me, as a PhD student looking to, start my career and do impactful research and things like that, it has really been an invaluable experience, the support that the Forestry Foundation and the Mel Fellowship has given me at this stage of my career. And so hearing from Marilyn and Yazan, their experiences as undergraduates, it's kind of really special that the Mel Fellowship has been able to support, students at all points in their academic careers, who are hoping to, make a difference in the field of conservation. And so with that, yeah, I want to thank the Maryland Forestry Foundation and everybody in attendance today. And I know that we'll have like time for questions in the panel, but I just wanted to make sure that I thank the Gary and Dawn and everybody who I've worked with so far with the Maryland Forestry Foundation. And thank you guys.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much, Damani. Yeah, excellent presentation from you and from all three of you today. And we're really glad to have you available and able to jump in and tell us about your experience and how it's benefited you. Damani, I was really excited, especially to hear you talk about the Natural Careers Camp, and in particular about that pipeline aspect, how we get the next generation of folks involved in forestry, the environmental sciences, and conservation. And so while we wait for more of our audience to add some questions into the Q&A chat, I would love to hear a little bit from each of you about how you first got engaged in, passionate about natural resources and forestry, and what ultimately led you to choose that as a career path. So Damani, would you mind kicking us off?
Yeah, absolutely. So in kind of drawing back to the Natural Resources Career Camp, some of my earliest experiences that got me interested in nature generally and then in conservation were summer camps and outreach opportunities while I was in middle school and high school, getting to get the hands-on experience. So getting to go out and hike, getting to talk and work with different scientists and really see that that it was an option as a career, and also just as kind of an issue of passion to kind of be interested in conservation and in nature. And so it really was kind of youth outreach when I was younger that really helped me decide what I wanted to do as far as be interested in research and specifically in conservation.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you. Marilyn, would you mind sharing a little bit?
Yeah, of course. So I actually wrote this in my application to the fellowship. But growing up, I had the privilege of being able to visit my family in New York in the Catskills. And so some of my earliest memories were going hiking and camping with my family in the Forest Catskill Preserve. My aunt is also, she has a career studying birds and aviation and how viruses are spread through them. And so she really kind of instilled in me the importance of environmental protection and environmental science. And so these experiences growing up there kind of contrasted the more urban and concrete environment from like my hometown. And so that's that's kind of like what got me really interested in environmental justice, environmental science, and natural resources conservation. So yeah.
Great. Yeah. Yazan, how about you?
Sure. So I actually did not have a very outdoorsy childhood, and I actually originally wanted to do journalism. So for me, it started with storytelling. In high school, I got accepted into what was my dream school at the time, the University of Southern California, Los Angeles, and I got accepted into their journalism major. But I ended up not being able to afford to go, so I took a gap year. And I stayed in Maryland, and I ended up getting a job at Pickering Creek Audubon Center, which is in Easton, Maryland. And it's an Audubon Center, so it's like a conservation center, a big protected area of nature, but it's also serves as an environmental education center. And so I spent 6 months living there, and also working as an educator. And so I had the chance to teach children from kindergarten all the way to high school seniors. And it was amazing. I think it was to this day, it's the most fulfilling and enjoyable work I've ever done. I just got to muck around the forest and go kayaking with kids, teaching them about, concepts like decomposition and ecology, biodiversity. And I fell in love with the discipline. And so ever since then, it's just kind of snowballed. I think a big part of it too is that I come from a long line of Palestinian farmers. And so the connection to the land is something that's always been very important to me. And it's my culture has always informed that. And finding ways to express that here in Maryland and through my time at University of Maryland has been really great. So not the most traditional start, but I'm very grateful for how it all happened.
Yeah, I fully relate to non-traditional pathways, and yeah, I think many of them tend to feed into the environment because it's kind of by very nature interdisciplinary. I think a lot of you, throughout the presentations today have sort of touched on other skill sets and interest areas that have helped you along your way and the pathway here. So again, just a reminder for folks in the audience, if you would like to ask any questions of our panelists, please feel free to drop those in the Q&A chat. If you are curious about aspects of their experience or their next steps, or what they might recommend to future fellows, we can jump in with that. Perhaps if any of you have thoughts on what you would recommend to folks who might be considering applying for a fellowship, and what to expect and how to make the most of your year with the Maryland Forestry Foundation. And if any of you have thoughts, please just jump on in.
Yeah, I can jump in on that. Just as far as like advice for a student looking for a fellowship like this, or any student interested in conservation generally, it's really all about seeking out opportunities. So initially I had not heard of the Maryland Forestry Foundation, and another student at the University of Maryland who was a past fellow kind of put the information out there, and I read up and then eventually applied because it fit really well with my research interest and kind of my interest in conservation. And so my advice is just to always be seeking opportunities like this, because sometimes they're not going to be right in front of you, and sometimes they're going to be with smaller local organizations, at your city level, at your county level, at your state level. Not everything is going to be NASA or NIH or really famous, well-recognized institutions, but the work is happening, and really good, important work is happening really at all levels. And so it can be as small as just reaching out to your local school district, your local environmental board. If you're interested, conservation, I would say, is a field that always needs more people. and is really open and accepting. And so to just put yourself out there and really pursue every opportunity. And then if you were to pursue this particular fellowship, to really kind of take on and try to make the most of your time by going to all the different events, the different webinars, participating in the activities that are going on, because just through some of those experiences, I've met some really great people, gotten some really great advice, and learned a lot. So yeah, my advice would be to follow up on any opportunity that you get your hands on, even if it's cold emails, cold calls. The work is there and it needs to be done. And there's space to do it, but you kind of have to find your space.
Great, thank you. Yeah, Marilyn or Yazan?
Yeah, Damani, those are great points. I just wanted to add on also, don't let failure discourage you. I know that in the case of this specific fellowship, I had actually applied the year prior and gotten rejected. But that doesn't ever reflect on your character. It shouldn't, discourage you from applying again. Many of the scholarships or fellowships or opportunities that I've gotten, I had applied to them initially, been rejected, and had to apply again. So that's just a part of the process, and it's not something that should steer you away.
Great advice. Yeah, Marilyn, do you have any comments to add on that topic?
Yeah, kind of just echoing what both of them said. Definitely take advantage of any opportunities that come your way, but also like really seeking out those opportunities, like Damani said, because a lot of the experiences working that I got beforehand that helps to supplement my application, I really just cold emailed people over and over again. I called their office. I asked them if I could intern for them. And through these experiences, I was able to eventually get some work in places that I never thought I would before. And those experiences have really helped me propel me to even apply for a fellowship like this and get considered and selected. So yeah, just really putting yourself out there, I would say.
Excellent, absolutely. Gary, are there any questions that you wanted to pose to the fellows, or make sure topics we make sure they touch on today?
Well, first, I'd like to thank all of them for the presentations that they've made today, and to simply say the foundation is extremely pleased to have them as Mel Fellows. They've been wonderful representatives of the program, and frankly, I'm very pleased to hear that they all feel that it's contributed to their professional maturation over the past year, and that they've had a variety of experiences which have helped them mature as students and prepare them for the future. I must admit that I'm a little concerned that we have not taken advantage of their expertise and insight as fellows as often and as frequently as we might otherwise. I'm challenged by the experiences you've each had to really ask you, even as a follow-up to this conversation, to share with the foundation, with Megan and myself and Dawn. You're familiar with all three of us, I think, about what you see as the biggest challenges for forestry in the future based upon the experiences you've had as students in the field, because we're always looking at the issues which will frame the future of forestry. And frankly, we want to attract a more diverse profile of folks into these careers. And you represent such a wonderful cross-section of diversity yourselves. Your experiences would be very valuable in helping to inform those of us who've been working in this field for quite some time about how we can continue to encourage broad participation in the field in the future. So my question is, in closing, if you had to identify the single most critical challenge you see facing urban and community forestry or natural resource careers, take it from every perspective you've got, what would be your response to that question if you were given an elevator speech to a senior policymaker, and you had about a minute and a half to say, hey, this is the thing we ought to be looking at in this field. I get that question a lot from major senators and legislators and even the governor himself. So it would be helpful to know your perspective if you were in my shoes at times, as you will be in the future.
Yeah, Gary, that's a
Go
great
ahead, Damani, go ahead.
question. Oh, all right, you go ahead. Jesus. Yeah, that's a really great question. Just kind of speaking from my, I think that at the end of the day, it's going to come down to outreach, to getting more people from all walks of interested and passionate about forestry, about conservation, about the environment, and really kind of making it a hot topic. You know, you have to make forestry cool in a way to really engage, you know, more youth and more people from different walks of life, in kind of a way that we've seen other important issues of our day kind of start to build more public recognition. I think that the environment could follow, you know, some of the examples that have been set with some of the recent other political movements, such as Black Lives Matter or Me Too and the movement, of really almost creating sort of a viral moment to really grab people's attention. And you know, it's been an issue for a long time. Environmentalism is, you know, as a concept, is hundreds of years old, but trying to find ways to get people more passionate from all walks of life. So, you know, it's not just people who are interested in work. We need doctors and lawyers and policymakers and bus drivers and teachers and really anyone this issue affects, which is really anyone who buy it and really get interested. So
Damani, unfortunately, your audio is cutting out. I think we caught
We
a good
lost
portion of that to understand your perspective, but did he drop off entirely? Nope, he's still with us, but yeah, the audio got a little tough there at the end. We're just a couple minutes out, but Yazan and Marilyn, if you'd like to join in on that part of the conversation as well.
Sure. So I think two main things. I think one unfortunate reality of going into the natural sciences that will sooner or later have to be addressed is how lucrative these careers can be. I have had firsthand experiences where I've had many older peers who got degrees in environmental science and worked in environmental science ultimately have to pivot because they could not make ends meet. And so they'll turn to nursing, or they'll turn to some other skill. Similarly, I've had supervisors who, you know, have multiple degrees, decades of experience, and they're also still often struggling to live comfortably. So how this can be addressed, I'm not sure, but it's definitely an issue. And I think when talking about this, it's always the uncomfortable elephant in the room. Other thing is education and outreach. I think that a lot of students, by the time that they reach their senior year, they learn a lot about other majors and opportunities that perhaps had they known about it their freshman year or their time during their time in high school, maybe they would have chosen a different career path. You know, the passion is there and the interest is there for urban forestry. We just have to go out and find it. The seeds are already planted. So I think doing more education, doing more outreach, whether it's to high schoolers, whether, you know, it's to younger college students, I think that'll be essential. I think education is always key. So, yeah.
I also was going to talk about education and the importance of funding natural resource education, specifically in forestry, and making sure that all students have the opportunity to experience what it's like being in nature and why it's so important to care and interact with it, and why it's not a separate issue from what we're living, why we're all interconnected. And so just making sure that there are more educational opportunities for young students from all different walks of life. And just funding in general, like Yasmin said, trying to make sure that there are opportunities for people looking for a career to be able to find one that will adequately pay them so that they can live. So more funding.
Right. Excellent points all around. I just want to thank you three again very much for joining us and talking about your experience. I know especially during finals week, it is tough to make time, but we really appreciate that you did. And I guess we would just welcome anyone who would like to get in touch with our fellows to reach out via the Maryland Forestry Foundation. We're happy to make connections if you have questions or opportunities that you would like to make any of our fellows aware of. And with that, I believe that is the end of our time today. So thanks to everyone for joining, and do feel free to watch this again when it is eventually posted via the Maryland Forestry Foundation at a later date. Gary?
Thank you very much, Megan, for summing up. I appreciate that. Let me remind everyone that the fellowships for the coming year are now open. And obviously you've seen some wonderful examples of our currently serving fellows, and the experiences they've shared are a part of the program. They've each mentioned the stipend that's available. It's one of the most generous in the nation. So we urge you to apply online in the coming several months. Applications are now open. Please share the opportunity widely. We're always looking for applications from universities here in Maryland. You must be a Maryland resident to apply, although you need not be attending a Maryland university to participate. Thank you very much for your time and attention, and tune in again next month in June for another one of our Framing the Future webinars. Thank you for joining us today.